Certainly there'll be time for Q&A at the end if you're online as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Krystin.
Thanks, Kim. So thank you guys all so much. And Kim, thank you so much to you and your ERG Women and Allies Planning Committee for making this event possible. Before we dive into the content of the talk and some of just the strategy and principles that we put together, I certainly will share a quick snippet about my practice and my background. My name is Krystin, and I have been in the financial planning space for almost 20 years. It will be 20 years this November that I have been in my practice helping families and individuals and clients navigate their financial planning objectives, reaching their milestones and accomplishing priorities. And I always like to say it's kind of like a bifurcated job. There's obviously the very tactical day-to-day where we manage money for a living, and we are buying and selling stocks, and we are implementing products, and we are doing a lot of analytical modeling and math to ensure that what we are recommending for a family makes sense. But the lens in which I really see what I do, and at the core and heart of it all, is deeply getting to know people on what we call like a soulful level and understanding what they envision for their life and how the money and the income can ultimately accomplish the life that they're trying to create. And that's what I think makes it, for me, a very fulfilling, kind of life's work. And I was mentioning to our friend over here, what's your name, sir?
Will.
Will?
Sorry,
Will. I was mentioning to Will that this talk is really relevant regardless of whether you're male or female, in the very beginning of your career or decades into your career, a conservative investor, an aggressive investor. It's kind of for everybody, but we are going to touch on the unique characteristics early on in the talk that make it even more challenging oftentimes for women to create financial security and financial independence in the long term. And then what we can do about it, not necessarily from like an activism standpoint, which is also important, but a talk for a different day, but just based on the realities of what we know today, how to move forward in our careers, in our financial planning life, in our personal life to set ourselves up for success. So 3 key financial challenges that women are often facing. Challenge number 1, very bluntly put, women are still often earning less than their male counterparts. And that is a fact of life that hopefully will be an irrelevant slide for our daughters and our nieces, but it is a fact of life, not in every industry, not in every company, but it is a challenge. Challenge number 2, and not just a financial challenge, but certainly a professional challenge, a personal challenge, is the caregiving aspect of motherhood, of caring for aging parents. So much of that responsibility often still falls predominantly on women. And that is a complex choice that many women have to face. There's no right or wrong approach, but it undoubtedly impacts our financial lives many times. And then challenge number 3, which doesn't necessarily out of the gate sound like a challenge, but it really truly can be, is longevity. Women on average live longer lives than men do. And while that can be such a blessing, it can also pose some significant financial planning challenges as well. So just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into each one of those 3 key challenges, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, women are still earning about 18% less than men do. And that is not to say that income equals financial security. We have clients in our practice that earn $1 million a year and spend $1.1 million. And we have clients in our practice that earn $80,000 a year and save $1,500 a month. So it's not like a perfect correlation, but it is important. It is important. caregiving in the United States, 75% of caregivers are women. And like I alluded to earlier, we all, even from our own mothers, right, thinking about our own moms, our peers, our friends, Kim, Krystin, and I have so many friends that have had to face the complicated choice of, do I work less when I have a child? Do I work differently? Do I stop working for a period of time and reevaluate once my children are older? And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. Everybody does what's best for their own unique set of circumstances and their family, but it certainly impacts the ability to continuously earn, to continually max out a 401k, to continually max out what your Social Security benefits are going to be, and all of the like. So just understanding that that can be a unique challenge is important, and having awareness around that. And we simply are all living longer. Women on average live about 2 years longer than men do. And this is just healthy women, healthy men. On average, women are going to live 2 years longer. It doesn't sound like a lot, but those 2 extra years are in retirement. And so if you consider those 2 previous challenges, the fact that we can be in a scenario where we're not earning to our maximum potential, and we might take breaks because of caring for elders or caring for young children, living and needing resources for an even longer period of time compared to males can present a problem and a challenge. And if you are married and you create the seats to your spouse, oftentimes, all times, your Social Security benefits will come down, and now you are no longer filing joint, so your taxes can go up, and healthcare expenses in later retirement can become a huge piece of your income need. So just to say that living longer, although a blessing, Kim's grandmother turned 100 this week. I mean, I should have had like a photo of her up on this slide. But it can present some unique challenges for women in particular. So with that in mind, with those 3 challenges at the backdrop, we're going to talk today about some financial planning concepts that can really proactively aid and abet us all getting to a place where we have the financial independence and the financial security that we long for. That doesn't necessarily mean having an 8-figure balance sheet or owning multiple homes. All that really means is living the life that we want to live comfortably without financial stress, without worrying about running out of money, running out of assets. So we're going to talk a little bit about goals and goal setting, just to kind of frame how important it is to get as clear as we can on like what it is that we actually are looking to accomplish financially. And then we're going to go through the 3 kind of pillars or tenets of financial planning from a protection standpoint, making ourselves bulletproof financially in the event of an unforeseen large expense, an illness, a disability. The exciting part of the talk, growing our wealth, growing our balance sheet, growing our nest egg so that we have robust assets. And then I'll spend a little bit of time, but not a lot, talking about once you've kind of accumulated, how do we now decumulate? How do we distribute assets in a tax efficient manner, in a market sensitive manner, keeping in mind the lifestyle that we want in retirement, and potentially having money left over for the next generation and creating legacy. So step number 1, and this is what we do in our practice with families all the time when we're having discovery conversations, is getting really, really specific on what the vision actually is, what the goals actually are. Yes, it's important to know your numbers. Yes, it's important to ultimately have a handle on what your interest rates are and what the balances are in all of your accounts. That's important also. But even more, certainly equally important, is just having a real idea of what it is that you're ultimately looking to accomplish. And this example is just being as specific as possible. So yes, my goal might be to buy a bigger apartment or buy a bigger home. Okay, tell me a little bit more about that. You know, what's the price point? What's the neighborhood? What's the kitchen going to look like? What are the taxes going to be? What kind of down payment do we need? What's the, the geographical footprint that we're looking at, just really getting clear and specific, because we don't know, when you write stuff down and you become really explicit with it, it's much more likely to manifest, it's much more likely to happen if we're really clear around what it is we're looking to accomplish. So diving now into the tenets of financial planning. Protection and risk management is always really at the base of what we work with families and clients to achieve. And what do I mean by that? What is risk management? Ultimately, risk management is making sure that we have a plan in place if something happens beyond our control, because life is unpredictable. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And ultimately ensuring that we have solutions that are going to mitigate the financial pressure, the financial stress, that large expenses that are out of the blue, or a health detour, or an issue, premature death even, can place on our personal lives. It's certainly not going to erase the life stress, but the financial stress, thankfully, is something that we can plan for, and there are strategies and products in place that can really mitigate the impact that that can have financially on our futures and from our long-term goals being achieved. So the first thing is really simply focusing on creating an adequate liquid emergency fund. We typically will recommend, if you are single, if you don't have dual income, 6 months of liquid expenses in the bank in a high yield savings account or something that you can easily access, right? So this is like financial planning truly financial planning 101. If you make, or need $10,000 a month to pay your bills, having $60,000 of liquid cash available. If you're married and you are both working at a high level or similar incomes, some families are comfortable having more of a 3-month emergency fund available to them. So we'll talk through that. And we have clients that are really, really conservative, sometimes that are older, that want 2 years of liquidity in the bank. So it is a very personal kind of choice, but the bottom line is having access to cash in the event that there's a job loss, in the event that there's a flooded basement, which happened to me and my family this year. It certainly was chaotic from like a life standpoint, but it didn't derail us from having our other financial objectives and our lifestyle maintained during that time. The next thing I'm going to talk about, which I would almost guarantee no one is really up at night worrying about their long-term disability insurance at work, or if they have enough, or if they need to examine it. But it is so, so important, especially when you're younger and you have decades of working years ahead of you that are really going to be the ball game when it comes to achieving financial security. As we get older, our nest egg is our most important asset, everything we've accumulated. When we're younger, it's us, it's our education, it's our training, it's our ability to get up every day and go to work, it's our health, right? Like we are our own ATM machine at the end of the day. So AIG is amazing because they, as well as most large and medium-sized companies, provide this for you. But it's worth taking a look at because there's usually caps and there's usually taxes. So just for your own knowledge, AIG does provide 60% of your compensation, but only up to the first $50,000 of annual compensation if you were to be out of work because of a health issue, injury, accident, whatever, after you've satisfied the first kind of short-term couple of weeks of being out of work. And Krystin and I were talking about this in preparation for this talk. I think there's still an association with being disabled and thinking like you are wheelchair bound, you are not able to do anything, kind of your life is over. And the reality is it couldn't be really further from that. Most of the clients that we are servicing on disability claims right now are still functioning members of society. They just need chemotherapy for 6 or 12 months. They just need physical therapy for a year. And they're not working. they're not able to work at the capacity that they would be prior to XYZ issue or event, but they are going to get better. And for that period of time, having a drastic haircut in their take-home pay would be really derailing. So AIG does offer supplemental plans that you can purchase above and beyond what they are giving you as an employer-paid benefit. Is it open enrollment season here in the next month or two?
I think it will be starting to.
It will be October, November. That's very common. So it's a great time to just say, hey, should I spend the extra, I mean, we're talking probably dollars, to make sure that my income is protected in the event there's a disruption at some point in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all of these years that I'm going to be working to ensure that what my pocketbook is getting on a monthly basis doesn't change regardless of whether I have a health blip or not. And AIG offers those plans, and then outside insurance companies like a Northwestern Mutual offer private supplemental policies as well. So life insurance, unlike disability insurance, which I truly think everybody should have a maximum amount of, unless you're independently wealthy and you're working, like if you're showing up here for the love of the game and not because your paycheck is important, disability insurance perhaps is optional. But that's not the case for most people. Life insurance typically becomes important when you have dependents or when you have debt. So some of the questions that you might want to ask yourself in evaluating, is now a good time for me to explore getting some additional protection? Do I have a big mortgage? Do I have student loans that somebody else would inherit if God forbid something happened to me? Am I helping my children or parents pay for their lifestyle? My husband, before we got married, before we had kids, had a lot of life insurance. And I remember saying, like, why do you have all of this life insurance if you're a single guy? He helps and was helping, and we still do, his parents support their lifestyle. If something happened to him, that would all go away. So it was really important to him, even before he had a conventional life insurance need, to protect his life and ensure that his parents would have a nice windfall to continue to have support over time. Certainly, are there other people who might need my financial support in the future? Do I want to leave a legacy? The number one time this becomes on our radar is when we get pregnant or when we start a family. And that is certainly, I would say, if you haven't gotten life insurance by that point, that's a key time to start evaluating what plans make sense. AIG offers this for us as well. So just by being employed, you have 1x your base salary at a minimum $50K up to a maximum of $250,000, all paid by AIG. And then they also offer supplemental plans where you can bump that protection up if it's relevant for your specific situation, typically without having to answer any health questions or go through a lot of hoops. And you can also purchase plans for partners and dependents with certain caps. And absolutely, at a certain point, once you've kind of outgrown group benefits, it often makes sense to explore how to supplement that privately. So now that we've got like the defensive strategy out of our way, we talk a lot about insurance planning and risk management being like the defensive part of financial planning, with the asset accumulation and growing our wealth being the offensive planning. How do we really put strategies in place that are going to help grow our balance sheet, grow our asset base, and ultimately give us that optionality, that flexibility in the future to make the choices that we want to make for our life and our lifestyle? And I hate to break it to everybody, but part of that does come from having an idea of what our budget is. And I feel like budgeting it's like counting macros. Like some people it's like a religion. We have clients that come with spreadsheets and spreadsheets for their spreadsheets around what their monthly expenses are. And they're very, very, very dialed into their budget. And we have other clients that like have no idea what they are spending on a monthly basis. And there's no judgment because everyone's personality is different. Everybody's what was modeled for them is different. And we don't necessarily recommend driving yourself crazy, evaluating like what your Netflix subscription costs and how many times you get a manicure or anything like that, where it's going to like impede on your joy. But having an idea of what you need and what you spend is definitely helpful, because ultimately it really helps us understand what surplus we have to work with. If your basic needs and your discretionary lifestyle needs are met and we have money left over, well, then we can get very tactical around how are we deploying those dollars into various buckets that make sense for you, that makes sense for your time horizon, that makes sense for your risk tolerance, and all of these other things. And we did include a QR code here in case you want to download our like little cheat sheet monthly budget. And I think you'll get a copy of the presentation, or it will be recorded in case you miss it. So what our philosophy is, and I say philosophy with like a lowercase p, because this isn't like a dogma. This isn't what like we don't die on this hill. But optimally, what we're going for when we're working with families, when we're working with individuals, is kind of a 20-60-20 approach. It's almost like, you know, kind of going like back to the macro example, like we're like 80% of the time we want to be eating clean, right? 80% of the time we want to be compliant, but we don't want to drive ourselves crazy and not live our lives because we, you know, don't want to go out to dinner or take an Uber an extra night of the month because it doesn't fit into a cookie cutter boilerplate budget, right? So this is a very general prescription, but it's something that directionally is advisable and really, really prudent and works. And the 20-60-20 approach is basically 60% of our take-home pay being allocated towards the basics, having a roof over our head, health insurance being paid, our car insurance being paid, our transportation being paid, our food being on the table, right? Like our basic bills. 20% of our take-home pay going towards what I like to say is like paying ourselves, right? Investing in tomorrow. Allocating dollars to the 401k, allocating dollars towards investments and cash and other vehicles that are going to be growth oriented. And then leaving that 20 remaining percent for more of the miscellaneous, more luxe, more discretionary lifestyle things that aren't like necessities, but are nice to haves, not have to haves. And trying to kind of have that model in mind when we're allocating our dollars, which are finite. We only get so many dollars in a paycheck every single month. So having some kind of formulaic approach to make sure that we're not sacrificing our lifestyle today, but we're also not sacrificing our autonomy in the future because we are unaware of how much we're spending or overspending today. I did want to touch a little bit on student loans, and the reason why this falls into the kind of wealth building category is it's really sometimes challenging to build wealth and invest and save when we have high interest debt, whether that's a mortgage is a little bit different, but certainly student loans and credit cards can really feel like you're taking, you know, one step forward and two steps back when it comes to building out a solid financial plan and a solid financial base. So I by no means am a student loan wizard, but just so that you know, and a lot of people don't know this, there are a lot of options available when it comes to revisiting your student loan package, revisiting what your student loan situation looks like, whether it's moving from a standard 10-year repayment plan to a graduated plan. A graduated plan simply means that you pay less today, you free up dollars that otherwise can be going towards higher interest debt pay down, typically credit cards, knowing that you're going to graduate into larger payments as your income in theory grows, as your capacity grows. But it can be a strategy that can alleviate what can sometimes feel like a very burdensome liability on your balance sheet. And I'm working to pay back my student loans, which can be very soul sucking. The other thing that we wanted to talk about, of course, is refinancing federal loans. Oftentimes, if you simply look under the hood, and if you are in a position where you have a good credit score and you have capability and you have been paying your bills on time, certainly refinancing your student loans is something that we're always looking at with clients. We do have an arm at Northwestern Mutual where student loan experts will get on the phone with our clients and line by line go through what their loans look like to evaluate the best strategy when it comes to repaying them, the best interest rate, with the best payment plan in terms of duration, without sacrificing the other objectives that we have in our lives and for ourselves and for our future and for our families. This probably goes without saying, but from a managing our credit card, I think the only reason I think people don't focus on the highest interest credit cards first is because they simply aren't aware of it. They haven't looked at what the interest is on various credit cards or various personal loans, and then identified a strategy to target those higher interest cards first. Very simply put, we certainly want to focus on paying down the highest interest debt on our liabilities column of our balance sheet first. A common question that we'll get is, well, should I stop putting money into my 401k, free up or lower the contribution that I'm putting into my 401k, free up some cash flow, and allocate those dollars towards high interest debt? And the answer is complex, and it's not like a black and white answer. But certainly, unless you're going to get a guaranteed 22% in your 401k, mathematically, it does make sense to consider doing something like that. Behaviorally, you kind of have to know yourself and say, okay, if I see an extra $700 in my paycheck, am I going to go ahead and increase consistently debt repayment, or I'm going to consume it? Everybody is different, but it's certainly something to look at. If you're going to have a big windfall in a short period of time, does it make sense to interrupt the flow and the good behavior of saving into a 401k to repay down debt? Maybe not, but it's certainly something to look if you just feel like you're on the hamster wheel with credit card debt. Is there other savings that temporarily I can stop or pause or change that's not yielding me the kind of rate of return that I'm paying in interest on my credit cards? Okay, this is one of our favorite slides, and we will talk through this with sophisticated investors, with novice investors, because it's really profound and it kind of blows a lot of people away, even people who understand the power of compound interest and investing early. But particularly for this audience, I wanted to make sure you have this in your ears or you have this in your eyes. What this shows is essentially 4 different investors: investor A, B, C, and D. And investor A is 25 years old, B 35, C 45, D 55 years old. And all of these gals are looking to accumulate $1 million by the age of 65. You guys are all go-getters. You're at an amazing firm. You're going to accumulate way more than $1 million by the age of 65. But for argument's sake, that's what we're looking at in this example. And all this is showing is using the exact same portfolio, the exact same rate of return. What does each investor need to save on a monthly basis for different durations of time to accomplish that $1 million nest egg at age 65? So not surprisingly, the 25-year-old who has 40 years of a runway to accumulate assets only has to save, I say only, but in context to this slide, it's only $381 a month, or $4,500 a year. Versus the 55-year-old who wants $1 million at 65 has to save almost $6,000 a month after taxes to accumulate that same exact end game. So the moral of the story here is start yesterday, right? Even if it's $50 a month, even if it's, a couple of extra percentage points in your 401k or into a investment portfolio is start really, really young, because number one, behaviorally, it just creates momentum and a good habit. And it really is so much less painful in terms of the dollar amount that you need to allocate to accomplish a lofty goal. The blue in this chart represents the basis, ultimately what you yourself have put into that hypothetical portfolio. And the yellow represents the growth, the compounding of the market just doing its thing over a long period of time. So I always think it's really profound that a 25-year-old who saves less than $400 a month is going to have $817,000 worth of market growth, making up that $1 million portfolio, having invested $182,000 over the course of that time. So I think that's really important just to take into context, not to necessarily do exactly that if it's going to impact you being able to eat or, go on vacation, but just the mindset of doing something in a systematic way without interruption. So switching gears a little bit, we know it's important to save early. We know it's important to be focused on debt. We know it's important to have awareness around what we're bringing in, what we're putting out, and what's left over. But let's just say we've kind of checked those boxes. We know what we're spending. We are good savers. We are allocating dollars for the future. How do we set up a portfolio that's going to be appropriate for where we are today, where we want to be tomorrow? And a lot of it comes down to just basic asset diversification and asset location. And we have a lot of clients that say, we're very diversified. Take a look at my statements. We're very, very diversified. And we take a look at their statements and they have 100 US stocks in their portfolio. So they have a lot of positions, but they're not necessarily diversified across the capital markets. So what we mean by diversification is we want to create a portfolio that has exposure to different asset classes, because every year there are winners and every year there are losers. And we never know in any given year what's going to be the winner and what's going to be the loser. And if you ever interact with a financial advisor or an economist or a wealth manager who tells you that they know what the market's going to do, you kind of want to run the other direction, because nobody really knows what's going to do well in any given year and what's going to do poorly. So the strategy to combat the unknowingness of what's going to happen in the future is having a little bit of everything in your portfolio, a mixture of stocks or equities, a mixture of bonds or fixed income, and beyond that, in those categories, having a mixture of US and non-US investments, having a mixture of large US companies and small US companies. Within international, having international developed exposure, international emerging market exposure, but just having kind of a basket of funds or ETFs or stocks or bonds that aren't going to be concentrated in one sector, one geographic region, or one particular category. And it sounds complex, potentially, but for the most part, when you're investing, particularly in your 401ks, it's very easy to accomplish that, oftentimes with one single fund. And you're like, well, you just said that I needed to have all of this different mixture and all of this different exposure. How do I accomplish that if I have one investment? Most 401ks have target date funds, and target date funds are a fund of funds that make up a lot of different investments that are going to be tilted risk-wise based on your age and what your target retirement year is. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about retirement. Saving for college. So when Kim and I were talking about what kind of topics make sense to present to this group of women and allies, and she said, well, something that I really want to learn about and get even more educated on is college, funding college education. The three of us went to different schools, expensive different schools, and who knows what the future will have in store for our children. But with the clients that we're working with, on the East Coast. Many of them have goals to fully educate their kids at like 4 years of Harvard price tag tuition. It is going to be very, very expensive to get there. So just like starting early and often is the prescription and the recipe for building financial security and financial freedom for your own self, for your own retirement, the same thing holds true with planning for college, whether you have children today or you're planning on having children. I snuck this slide in there for just kind of an FYI. We were laughing. We're like, what private school average is $53,000 a year? I feel like that's the fourth grade tuition that I'm paying for my son's like elementary school right now. But on average, US state averages, the private average for a 4-year school is just about $53,000 and for public $23,000. And this just shows us if we have a newborn today or a 2-year-old or a teenager or a child about to go to school, how much that tuition is going to inflate to based on what college inflation has historically been in past decades. College inflation, just like medical expense inflation, is significantly higher, 2 to 2.5x what the CPI is. So it is growing at a rapid pace. There is a lot of speculation on what the college experience and ecosystem is going to look like when our young children go to college. But knowing what we know today, this is how we plan for college education in the future. And the most popular strategy to start allocating money into a dedicated tax advantaged account for kids' college is 529 plans. 529 plans are great. They have some pros, they have some cons, as every investment vehicle or strategy does. But every state mainly has their own 529 plan. You do not have to fund your own state's 529 plan, nor does your child have to go to the state, to a college in the state in which you funded the 529 plan. That is completely irrelevant. The reason why in New York State, many people will fund the Vanguard NY Saves 529 plan is because there are some unique state income tax advantages to participating in your home state. I live in New Jersey, and the New Jersey 529 state plan is Franklin Templeton. There are no New Jersey state income tax specific advantages to enrolling in the New Jersey state plan. So my kids' 529 plans are the Virginia plan. So it's kind of irrelevant in terms of what state you're participating in. The main tax benefits that all 529 plans participate in is the tax deferred growth of the investment, and then the tax-free access of those dollars once you start cutting tuition checks. So in a typical investment account, you are contributing dollars into it, but anytime you sell out of that security or sell out of that position outside of a retirement account, you're paying long-term capital gains tax on that trade, on that sale. In a 529 plan, you could have hundreds of thousands of dollars of gain inside that account. And when you go to cut that Carnegie Mellon tuition check, all of that gain comes out 100% income tax-free, capital gains tax-free, net investment income tax-free. There are zero taxes. So it's a great tool. It also now, post the Secure Act of 2020, can be used for elementary school or high school up to $10,000 a year. So they did broaden the usage of 529 plans a little bit in the last handful of years. The downside of 529 plans, and sometimes people that have one child fear with overfunding a 529 plan, is if you do not send your child to college, or your kid is like gonna go be the next Mark Zuckerberg and start a business, or I mean, in that case, you probably don't have to worry too much about money. But if your child doesn't go to college and you take that money and say, here's your 529 plan money for your down payment, or to go to Europe, or to buy a car, you are going to get penalized with taxes and penalties. So again, there's pros and cons, but if you have a lot of children, chances are somebody's going to college and you're going to have education costs in some way, shape, or form.
Can I ask a question? Sure.
Do you have like one for each child?
Great
Or
question.
do you do like, can you do one so it compounds quicker for all of them?
We typically will recommend that you have one per child, especially if they're spaced out in age, because the age-based portfolios that are most commonly used with 529 plans are going to have a asset allocation that are unique to when that child is going to college. So if you have a 1-year-old, that account's going to be super aggressive. It's going to have mostly equities. If you have a 16-year-old, that account is going to be more conservative because you're not going to want to have volatility on the heels of needing to use that money. You can always change beneficiaries of 529 accounts. So if you do have one 529 and you have drain it to a certain extent for one older child, you can then flip the switch and change the balance to a new beneficiary, your younger child. No right or wrong answer, honestly, but we typically are recommending different accounts for different children. Yeah, great question. So now we have educated our children. We have done what we were supposed to do. We have budgeted, but we have also lived, and we feel really good about our financial health. Retirement. We want to start thinking about what is that going to look like for me, and kind of going back to goal setting. It's okay not to have like super clear, crystal clear, concrete goals. I say that because some people don't want to buy real estate. Some people don't want to renovate a kitchen. Some people don't want like a specific targeted thing right now. In a different season of your life, you might have very specific, clear goals, but that's not always the case. It's also okay to say, I just want to live the lifestyle that I want to live. I just want to be able to travel multiple times a year. I want to be able to give to charities that are and causes that are important to me. So it's okay not to know, especially with a younger audience, like, what is my retirement vision going to look like? Do I want to work? You know, my mom worked until full time until she was almost 70, and now consults 4 days a week into her 70s. The only day she's not working is when she's babysitting her children, which is work and more work, the hardest job. So it's okay not to know necessarily like what your ultimate like or idealistic retirement is going to look like at 25, 35, even 45 plus. But it is important not to completely disregard it and ignore it as something that we want to focus on. Because even if you have the personality, like my mother, who probably will work until the day she dies, she doesn't have to do that to keep the lights on, to keep food on the table. She's choosing to do that because it's bringing her fulfillment, it's challenging, it's part of her DNA, it's just what she wants to do. But we're always talking to clients and families about, all right, even if you're somebody that's going to work until the day after you die, we want to work towards a financial outcome that allows you to stop working if you change your mind at a certain point in the future, or work differently, or work less, or work pro bono, or do something else that is not for monetary gain, but is putting you in a position of, again, choice, autonomy, flexibility down the line. And there's a lot of different ways that we can accumulate resources tax efficiently, tax diversified for the long term. I think there was a question that had come in for the talk today about, well, what's better? Is a Roth 401k better? Is a traditional 401k better? So we can talk a little bit about that. What's amazing and illuminating, and I'm sure most of you know this, but if you don't, but we wanted to give, mad props to AIG for their employer match and the 401k program that is available to all of you here. Krystin and I review hundreds of 401k plans a year with clients, employers, and honestly, we very rarely see something this generous, especially for like rank and file employees. So it's really fantastic. AIG automatically contributes 3% of your eligible pay into your 401k, no questions asked. Beautiful. Then you can obviously contribute into your own 401k, either pre-tax or post-tax, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And there are IRS limitations that cap, like you can't put 100% of your paycheck most times into your 401k. 23,500 is the IRS maximum, I believe, for 2025. So there are some contribution limits. After you make your contribution, AIG matches 100% of every $1 you contribute up to the first 6%. So they kind of nudge you here. Consider contributing at least 6% so you don't miss out on literally free money. And that's up to a 9% contribution from AIG, plus the company match contribution is immediately vested 100% the day it goes in the account. So we were just kind of saying, okay, if you make $100,000 a year, they're putting $3,000 into your 401k, no questions asked. You then, at a minimum, should be considering putting 6% in or $6,000. They're going to dump another $6,000 on top of that. And year one, you have $15,000 sitting in an investment portfolio that for most young people is going to be allocated aggressively. And if we look at what market performance has done, even this year in 2025 year to date, you'd be up, several $1,000s in that 401k almost overnight. Not that that is always going to happen. Market volatility is inevitable, but these are accounts that you're not going to touch. You're not going to touch for decades. So it's such a generous 401k matching and overall program that we really wanted to highlight that and make sure you had the education there. Going back real quick to the nuances of 401ks versus IRAs versus Roth. We get this, it's probably one of the top questions that we get in our practice. Do I put money into a Roth or do I put money into a traditional? And it's very nuanced and it's very case specific. It depends on your tax bracket. We always consult your CPA. We never want to stop putting money into a pre-tax vehicle if it's going to bump you into another tax bracket. We are at historic lows right now with tax brackets, although nobody probably feels that way. But the idea of putting money into a Roth is that you pay the tax now and you never have to pay that tax again. We are almost always recommending people do a little bit of both, again, based on diversification, location of those assets, etc. To wrap up, we don't have too much about the decumulation strategies that we subscribe to, our methodology around that. We knew this audience was going to be more in the accumulation phase of planning. But certainly more people, we always use this analogy, more people die descending Mount Everest than climbing Mount Everest. Climbing Mount Everest is a liken to the accumulation phase, right? We're building wealth, we're saving, we're investing, we're growing. The decumulation phase is now I have stopped working and now I need to turn my asset base into my paycheck. And so we talk through a lot of tax strategy with clients that are ultimately retiring and what that all means. From an estate planning standpoint, typically relevant as your life matures and becomes more complex and sophisticated, but it's never too late to get some basic estate planning docs in order, from wills to healthcare proxies, health directives, power of attorney. We don't do that work in-house, but it is all connective tissue at the end of the day. And the last thing I wanted to share before we wrap up today, and I ask you guys to take this quick little fancy survey. We are not money psychologists. We are not therapists. But a lot of what we find when we're working with clients and families is people coming to a meeting or people coming to a conversation with like a money story in their head that is oftentimes inherited from our parents and what was modeled. Like we have clients that could retire today. They have a lot of wealth. And because of the environment that they were raised in, they are just like, they won't buy a new bathing suit every summer because they don't think they can afford it, right? They're holding on with like white claw knuckles to their money. And then we see other people that were sometimes raised in that same environment that go the other direction and are like very reckless with spending. And what we're always trying to kind of talk through with families is, yes, there's math behind all of it. There's there's analysis, there's a lot of technical and thoughtful work, but psychologically, I think the best place to approach your relationship with money is to have it be very neutral, not obsessed with it, not scared of it, but trying to the best of our ability to have a very like neutral relationship with money. And that also takes, just like goal setting, a little bit of soul searching, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of examining, is how I feel about money, my own feelings. Is it just what I was told to feel? Is it what my friend circle feel? And I just wanted to throw that in there because I do think it is a very complex topic and emotional topic for a lot of us. To wrap it up, we are so thankful to all of you for listening and your undivided attention. I think we spoke for like 45 minutes about financial planning topics, and I know that is not always what is on tap for Thursday afternoon. We are an all-female team. We are a team of all mothers, in fact. We're really proud of that. We talk a lot about that in our practice, and it is pretty unique in the industry, in fact. And we've been serving our clients for, over 2 decades. So I like to say we've seen it all. We've never seen it all. But if you want to take just literally 1 minute, we have a quick 3-question survey. It also will allow you, if you have very personal or specific questions about your situation, to set up a conversation or ping me. And that's it.
Or if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions
Or
now, I think
online.
we have the floor for another 20 minutes or 15 minutes.
We do actually. I don't know
Yeah.
what everybody's schedules are, but.
Yeah,
there's
if
any
anybody
questions.
has any questions that they want to pose to the group or to.
Kristen, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Maybe what other people are thinking. I didn't really think about it, but our 529 plans, is it only for college, not post-grad?
You could use it for post-grad. You can use it now up to $10,000 a year for elementary and high school as well.
So if you're like, have too much money in your 529.
If you have too much money in your 529, which I actually have a client who has millions of dollars now trapped in a 529 plan because college was funded by trusts and he had a lot of children. So if you have too much money trapped in a 529 plan, good problem to have. Doesn't happen often. But you can certainly change the beneficiary to nieces or nephews, yourself, grandchildren. And now you can do up to, I believe it's $33,000 of a conversion from a 529 plan to a Roth IRA for your child. That is also a new IRS regulation. And grad school, post-grad is also certainly an eligible expense for 529s.
Thank you. This has been amazing. I have a question about life insurance.
Sure.
And as a not young person in the room, but thank you for calling us young. At what point would you recommend getting private life insurance because you're thinking about leaving, like
Retiring or,
retiring, and
yeah.
you no longer have the AIG plan?
Right. Great question. Quite candidly, we are almost always recommending at any age having some amount of private protection. And the group plan is kind of gravy. Cost-wise, it's sometimes cheaper to buy your own portable plan that moves with you, regardless of where you work or don't work, compared to buying up the extra at your company. Because typically when you buy it at work, it is a average cost based on an average health assessment. You're not having to answer questions. So if you're not in great health, group insurance is usually very cost effective. If you are in great health, private insurance sometimes can be cheaper because they are looking at you and only you. And if you're in exemplary health, they're going to give you, preferential pricing based off of that. So I tend to say as early as possible, have some of your own private insurance. But certainly as time goes on and you need more insurance, you can only buy so much at your job. And the reality is like, sometimes we need millions of dollars of life insurance when we're in our 30s, 40s, and 50s because we are so critical financially to our families and to our children and spouses. So
And just one.
I would
thing
say
to
as
add
early as
to
possible.
Term insurance, the premiums are so much lower than people typically think, like when you do have the analysis
And when you
done.
buy it young and you lock that rate in young, it's super, super cost effective.
I mean, we're talking like tens of dollars, not hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
So if
It
you
can
have
be
the
really, really
analysis done, it
inexpensive
is
to
worth
do, even if you're 40 or 50 years old, to have your own policy and then it's locked in for 20 or 30 years and you don't have to worry about going to a smaller company that doesn't have robust benefits, or working on your own, or being an entrepreneur in your next life and not having the suite of benefits that a big company would have.
We have a couple of questions from the online group, but
Oh, wait,
were
was
there
there-
some more?
yeah, I feel like
Go
there was.
ahead.
Yeah, my question is about 401ks. So if you have like historical 401ks, are there benefits in consolidating it or just leave it where it is? And if you see it performing better, then, adding it to one.
Yeah,
that's just
such a
like
good
that.
question. And we run into this all the time with clients that have piecemeal 401ks from past jobs and past lives. I would say the rule of thumb is it's typically going to be more efficient to consolidate it into one IRA or an existing current 401k. Mainly for like just the disorganization of having statements coming from many different places. Sometimes there are admin fees in each individual old plan. Some plans, once you separate from service, you have to consolidate. They don't let you, in certain cases, keep it lingering in a employer plan where you're no longer employed. Nothing wrong with that, but I think in the effort of getting simple, of getting consolidated, not wanting overlap from an investment standpoint and having to kind of manage the investments, in terms of performance, a large cap fund is going to do the same thing in one account as it's going to do in the other account, right? So not focusing so much on the alpha, more so on like, what's an appropriate asset allocation for my age and stage, and how do I simplify this and consolidate this so that it's not overwhelming or messy or stressful. So we consolidate 401ks into IRAs in our practice very, very commonly.
There's a question online. Can the 529 plan start before you even have children?
That's a good question. I think in some states, you can start a 529 plan without a social security number. It just is not going to be for like a specific, like you'd have to name a beneficiary, which you can make yourself the beneficiary. And people do save for grad school and other second careers, 529 plans for themselves. But ultimately, the child needs to exist to have it be their 529 plan. You own the 529 plan. It's not an asset on the child's balance sheet, but they are the beneficiary of it.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Question.
Yeah.
For the 2026 rule, for the 20% of savings, is that going into investments or is that going to like a high yield savings account?
Both.
Or,
Yeah, and it's
like, where is that 20%? Where should it go?
a little bit of everything. Let me go back to that slide because that's a great question. So you'll see here, it's directional, right? And so everyone's situation is, if you don't have an emergency fund built up yet, then 20% of your extra, savings bucket should be going towards ramping up that savings account. I think that's really prudent. If you've already built up $60,000 of savings, and now you're saying, okay, I'm making 2, 3, 4% in a money market, I still have this extra $500, $600, $700 a month to allocate. Okay, now let me reevaluate and shift it towards something that is, more aggressive, more growth oriented. So it really depends on what stage you're in, what your goals are. Certainly, if you're looking to have a home purchase happen soon, we're kind of sticking everything in cash, because if that down payment needs to be ready to go in 12 months or 24 months, we want to be really liquid. If that is not at all on your horizon, you have a healthy emergency fund baked, well, then you can really increase your 401k contribution, increase what you're doing towards more aggressive growth-oriented investing, and it can kind of shift and twist and turn based on like the life season that you're in. Basically, though, I think if you don't have a tremendous amount of liquidity in cash, that's a healthy place to start. That's a really important place to start.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Kristen and Christine, for coming and for sponsoring lunch for us.
Yeah, eat up, take the survey. And if you have any other questions, my contact, check me. I do market commentary on Instagram every single week. Just updates on the market. It's like 90 seconds. It's like, if you don't want to read the Wall Street Journal, but you want to understand what's happening with interest rates, come follow me on Instagram. I talk a little bit about market commentary and what's going on Wall Street. And then definitely fill out my survey. I'd love to hear your feedback, and stay connected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.